Alright, so I Am Blue, In Pain, and Fragile by Yoru Suno. Alright. That's kind of like the cover art of it. And so we grew up, never leaving those years behind. Alright. I don't believe there are chapters in this book, so let's get started. Every action you take has the chance of making someone else unhappy. That was the philosophy by which I was raised for 18 years of my life up until I graduated high school. So, as a freshman at university, I decided to make this the principle by which I lived my life. In other words, never would I carelessly approach others, nor would I even ever speak up enough to voice an opinion which might contradict anyone else's. Thus, I believed I would decrease the possibility that I might ever inconvenience anyone else, as well as the chance that anyone who has ever inconvenienced by me might wound me in return. And so, when I first laid eyes upon Akiyoshi Hisano at my university, I thought very little of her. Here, I thought, was proof of how foolish, overconfident, and dull the people of this world could be. It was the second Monday of my first freshman term. For the most part, I had finished selecting my course, and starting this week, my studies would begin in earnest. On such a day as this, when I was possessed of such righteous motivation, I, who had yet to join any clubs or take part in any of the usual freshman activities, found myself sitting alone in the corner of a large lecture hall. All I hoped for was some measure of peace in my university life. Third period was a general civics course of sorts, I believe. As I thumbed idly through my textbook, the lecturer finally took quietly to the lectern, a respectful hush falling over the room full of freshmen. Of course, throughout the 90 minutes of undivided attention that such a lecture demanded, that dutiful focus began to wane. The hall was soon abuzz with chatter. Even the teacher, likely accustomed to this annual progression, paid this little mind, simply continuing the lesson. I was no exception here, as one of those people who could never ever maintain my attention in my high school classes. Those 90 minutes of class felt like an eternity beneath the spring sunshine. A feeling that I wasn't sure I would be able to bear for the next 4 years. The lesson quickly became tedious from my seat at the edge of the room. I could see outside the window the laughter of fellow class students and the chirping of the birds melted into the sunlight. It was just as my head began to droop and my chin was about to slide from my hands that I heard a voice come crashing through this beautiful sunny day. Pardon me, can I ask a question? A loud, vivacious voice echoed across the quiet lecture hall. Everyone, startled into attention, began glancing around, looking for the source of the disturbance. I was similarly intrigued, but there was no need for me to look around myself. I had heard the voice straight from its source, the girl sitting one seat over to my right. I furtively glanced over to see her right hand thrust straight up toward the ceiling. Achingly selfish her. I had not been paying attention to the lecture, so I thought that perhaps the teacher had opened the floor for questions. However, the aged lecturer merely met her piercing gaze with a dull stare, urging her to lower her hand with a "save your question for the end." I kept watching the girl out of the corner of my eyes. She eventually lowered her hand, but the sour expression she made must have been visible even from the teacher's podium. "Alright, now is fine," the lecturer relented. She instantly perked up, her thanks echoing throughout the room. As I think about it now, I'm sure that if she had presented some kind of jaw-dropping opinion that no ordinary student would ever have thought of and started a debate with the professor, I might have started to develop an actual interest in the creatures known as college students. I might have thought that there were some truly spectacular specimen out there in the world, and that would have been that. However, that was not the case. I don't think that violence is necessary in this world. Hearing this question, or rather this expression of an opinion that had merely been disguised as a question, and an opinion that quite frankly belonged in an elementary school ethics lesson, I was filled with second-hand embarrassment. There you go, Faye. I suppose she was something of an idealist. Not even attempting to hide his sneer, the lecturer replied, "I'm pretty sure we're all aware that a world like that would be ideal." I know my ears were not just playing tricks when I heard the murmured "yeesh," "what the hell," and "ouches" from all around the room. Having thoroughly embarrassed herself, the girl fell silent. The teacher then continued as though the girl did not even exist, as though he were simply ridiculing some formless theoretical idiot somewhere out in the world. When I looked back at her again, it was not because I was curious to see what sort of person would be so excited to voice their own opinion that they would bother interrupting a lecture. It was merely because I enjoyed seeing the looks of disappointment upon idiots' faces when their own foolish words were rebutted. Thus, while I would not call the look that I saw on her face when I glanced over disappointing, it was at least unexpected. She looked hurt. She was staring forward as if in shock. It was seeing people who behaved just as she did back in junior high that had led me to decipher a pattern to their way of thinking. They were the sort of people, I was sure, who believed oddly in their own logic, making everyone else around them who could not understand them stupid. And so, I was surprised to not see her express the sort of displeasure that such types of people typically did when they were denied. I had no interest in getting involved in this, but her face certainly piqued my interest. However, this interest was nothing more than what one might feel at hearing a strange melody when walking down the street. And by the time the bell rang, I had already forgotten all about it. I handed in my copy of the brief feedback survey we had been provided with in order to confirm attendance and stood up for my seat. I did not have any classes scheduled for fourth period on Mondays, so I decided to head to the cafeteria to take a late lunch. At a university, there were always people in the cafeteria no matter how odd the hour. With nowhere to really situate myself in this environment I was not yet used to, I loaded one of the day's meal sets onto my tray and then settled myself at a 4-person table by the window, clapping my hands together and bringing my miso soup to my mouth. With the seat taken, a voice from a conversation that had nothing to do with me emerged from the sea of sounds around me. I obviously was certain that the voice could not be speaking to me of all people, so I just chomped down on my fried fish, and a sudden poke to my shoulder shocked me into dropping the half-eaten fish to my plate with a satisfying crunch. I looked up, chopsticks still in hand, and was doubly surprised. The girl who had been sitting beside me in the lecture hall was standing there with a tray full of katsu curry. For some reason, I kept looking back and forth between her and the curry. And the seat taken? She asked, which is when I realized that the voice I had heard before had been most certainly directed towards me. Oh, no, it's not. I had no idea why she was speaking to me. However, I had no reason to lie. So I simply shook my head. She flashed me a grin, face beaming, and sat her tray down, taking the seat opposite mine. I was next to you in class earlier. Mind if I eat with you? Since you're alone too. Seriously? I thought. Not only was she the type to blab her own opinions in the middle of class, but she was undeservedly self-confident. It made me cringe. The only reason I did not refuse her was that, as per my own personal philosophies, I place more weight on not contradicting others' opinions than on distancing myself from them, because that was merely the sort of mood I was in that day. There was no other reason. Certainly, I said politely, as it suddenly occurred to me that she might be an upperclassman. The fact that she thought it natural to speak so casually with me led me to assume that. She considered me, who had been in a lecture hall full of freshmen, her junior. That she had so suddenly decided to share lunch with a stranger like it was nothing was perhaps not a mark of how annoying she was, but merely that she was an upperclassman with too much time on her hand. Loosen up there. I'm just a freshman. What? Wait, are you actually my senpai? I really should have fled from this conversation. Just the way she was goggling at me with her huge eyes was enough to inform me that this was a vexing person. Still, there was no reason for me to lie. So I just shook my head. I'm a freshman too. Oh, thank goodness. I was kind of freaking out there. Thought I might have ruined my university reputation right from the get-go. She put a hand to her chest, breathing a huge, exaggerated sigh of relief. Didn't you ruin your reputation already with that act you put on in class, I thought? Anyway, sorry to impose on you out of the blue like this. I still don't know anyone else here. Just when I was starting to get antsy, I saw you. We were sitting next to each other in class, so I just thought I'd talk to you. Sorry, was that rude of me? It was. Yeah, it's fine. Oh, sweet. I'm Akiyoshi Hisano. How truly bold of her to presume I cared. I'm majoring in political science, you? Business, actually. I see. Could I ask your name? The way she asked that really left no room for refusal. Sure, Tabata. Well, I know we just met, but pleased to meet you, Tabata-kun. Akiyoshi bowed her head. Her bluntly cut shoulder-length hair swayed. I politely bowed my head in return, in most cases. When an unplanned event occurred, it was typically most advantageous just to play along. Yeah, the main character is very... I don't know the right word. Judgmental? So, Tabata-kun, can I ask your first name? I faltered. It was an incredibly ordinary question, one which she was at no fault for asking. Though it was more or less a personal problem. The fact was that I hated my name. If I were some kind of supermodel, maybe I would have been proud of how flowery my name was. Or, on the other hand, if I were super burly and the direct opposite of the impression my name gave, that contradiction might have been a source of comedy. However, it was the fact that I was wholly nondescript and neither of those things that made me hesitate to share it. But then again, I was not the sort of person who was brave enough to ignore someone's question. Kaide. Of course, one's own common complexes meant nothing to others. Tabata Kaide-kun, she sounded out. Ta as in tambo, and hata as in hatake? She asked, asking to pin down the kanji for my name. Oh, no. hata, like in hashiko. Akiyoshi pulled her cell phone out of her bag, tapped at it in a practiced fashion, and then tucked it back away. The strap of the bag dug into her shoulder. No, take it. Grinning, with eyes narrowed and teeth bared. She lifted her spoon and took a bite of her katsu curry, as though it were some long-awaited treat. Realizing I had, for some reason, watched this entire sequence of actions, I averted my eyes and once more took a bite of the fried fish soup. Fried fish atop my own plate. I need to brighten up the setup here, because the reason why I'm making so many mistakes while reading is because it's a little bit dark. Very stuck up. I think that's a better word. Gosh, I was hungry. My stomach was growling all the way through class. You hear it? No, I didn't. I was not paying attention to such things whatsoever. Well, that's good. I've always got a pretty healthy appetite. Don't judge me if I end up eating more than you, okay? Good metabolism, huh? Old habit from when I played soccer for a bit in high school. I probably need to start eating less though. A bit, I noted. Which led me to the independent conclusion that she probably had not attended some kind of powerhouse school that was all about winning. The fact that she needed to cut back also meant that she probably had no intention to continue playing through college. You play any sports, Tabata-kun? Or, sorry, I'm asking a lot of questions. Apparently she did have some tentative measure of consideration. I'd assumed from her display in class that she was the sort of person who would step all over others' personal boundaries. At least she apparently had the courtesy to take off her shoes before doing so. It's fine. I didn't really do any physical activities in high school. Oh, more the artsy type? I was part of the Go Home Club. No plans to do anything in college either? Not really, currently. Oh, what about you? Akiyoshi-san. I was thinking I'd joined something. But when I looked into all the groups on campus, including the unofficial ones, there were just way too many options. So I'm interested in the Model UN or something, though. Moto UN? I parroted. Yeah, that sounds very cool, she said, taking the opportunity to immediately launch into an explanation of the group. To simplify Akiyoshi's exposition, this club was apparently one where students interested in international affairs took on the role of different nations and carried on mock sessions of the United Nations. Of course, I was starting to form a more solid internal picture of her. How does something like that sound to you, Tabata-kun? Sounds like an overly complicated TTRPG game. I had no reason to either criticize or laud the Model UN concept, so I simply voiced one of my opinions on the matter that did not lean either way. This time, Akiyoshi was the one to parrot. TTRPG? Given the way that the conversation was going, it would be odd of me not to take my turn at explaining. I gave her a brief, simple, and objective as possible explanation of what a TTRPG, or tabletop role-playing game, was. So yeah, there's also the kind of game where you play different roles, I think. Whoa, that's so cool. I would definitely want to play some type of hero. She held her still curry-covered spoon out in front of her face, perhaps attempting to mime the wielding of a sword. Seeing this joyful reaction got a surprising stir out of me. I guess the Model UN really is kind of the same. Wanna go check it out with me? Never up to it? Oh, no, I can't. Whenever I had to refuse an invitation that came my way, I hated having any looks of disappointment cast on me, or having to do the same, or even someone being disappointed about it at all. Thus, though refusing this casual invitation of Akiyoshi's conflicted slightly with my own philosophies, Akiyoshi had no idea that I was this way and smiled, clasping her hand in front of her chest with a, "No, it's cool. Sorry for imposing on you so suddenly." The fact that she seemed to realize that there was some drawback to her own personality gave me a slightly more favorable impression of her. Just slightly. "Oh, no, that's okay. I really don't mind it," I said. "Really? I'm glad. I know that I can be a bit much sometimes." So I had gathered. I had assumed from her bubbly nature that she was not capable of such self-awareness. So I was surprised at this newfound calm of her. It made me wonder if she was the sort of person who really only thrived within a small, close-knit group. I had no idea whether calling her that I didn't mind had merely encouraged her. But her barrage of questions continued. I answered them as well as I could and learned more of her in return. She was born in Ibaraki, currently enrolled in school, lived alone, and had applied for a part-time job at a cram school. She liked shonen manga and was a fan of Asian Kung Fu Generation. Based solely on this information, she would have seemed like a perfectly normal person. But unfortunately, I was hearing all of this through the lens of my first impression of her in class and through the filter of my view of her as an irritating person. I saw no reason to amend my perception now. There was no need to do so. "Catch you later then," she said, standing from her seat. The building that her next class was in, apparently rather far away. I waved a hand at her, replying, "Sure, later then." But in fact, I did not assume that there would be a later. It was not me being cold-hearted though. People like Akiyoshi, who could have conversations with anyone, soon found better people to talk to, forgetting the acquaintances they had made along the way. I had been the subject of this many times before and understood by now that such things were inevitable. Inevitable. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry, I hit the mic. So just as I did not think there would be any laters to come, I did not feel that there was any reason why I should need to fully comprehend Akiyoshi. However, I did not even have to wait until the following Monday. That Friday during fourth period, when Akiyoshi, who was sitting boldly in the front of our 50-person classroom, saw me enter through the front door, she waved at me. When I took my seat in the farthest row to the back by the window, she picked up her things and moved to sit next to me. "Hey, Frank. Like Thanos?" I'm not sure what I was referring to. Oh, and that... Whatever, dude. "Morning. Been a while, eh? Tabata-kun." "Oh, yeah. You in this class too?" "Yeah, didn't realize you were too." I'd taken a seat farther away from her, assuming she had come with friends. But I suppose it was a good thing that she relocated. There had been no point in such serious, careful consideration on my part. Just as she was cheerfully telling me about how she had gotten the cram school job, the bell rang. It did not seem that there was anyone else around that she was acquainted with. The moment class started, she clammed up right away, looking dutifully ahead. I was not quite so dutiful, but I faced forward anyway, lending my ear to the lecture, quietly, dazedly pondering the fact that Akiyoshi's later had in fact come to be. However, I need not have been so fixated on this. About an hour into class, I was made aware of what was perhaps the most important fact about her of many. There came a voice. "Pardon me? Can I ask a question?" Once more, there was no need for me to search for the source of this voice, seriously. I thought, once again, she was right beside me. Only this time, I knew her voice. I looked over to see her hand yet again boldly raised. The lecturer this time was far kinder to her. "Oh, sure. You're paying attention after all. Might as well participate in the class. What's up?" said the teacher, permitting her to speak. "Thank you," she said. I already had some prediction about what it was she was going to ask, but when that prediction came true, I regretted having thought it. Once more, her voice resounded throughout the room with a statement of childlike opinion, disguised as a question. This time, I did not soundly belittle her. I was merely stunned. That time in the cafeteria, I had come to believe that she was at least somewhat of a normal person. However, my bewilderment was a little premature. From elsewhere, I heard words of disbelief. Again, I understood the sentiment 100%. It was time for me to revise my opinion about Akiyoshi. Akiyoshi was not just annoying, she was dangerous. She was not someone to associate with. I pretended to focus on the lesson, taking care of not to glance even once at the dangerous person sitting beside me. I understood now that this was why no one approached her, why she would even bother to remember me and strike up such a friendly conversation. Apparently, other people's senses of danger were even more finely honed than mine. There was perhaps still time to get out of this. While I half watched, as, like before, the lecturer rebutted Akiyoshi with a grimace, I began contemplating some evasive maneuvers. For now, all I could do was simply run. The moment class ended, I stood up, handed in the impression survey that I had already filled out during class, and left the room, not once looking Akiyoshi's way. That would afford me at least a momentary measure of peace. When I came to next Monday's lecture, when we would cross paths again, I would simply wait until the very last moment to enter and take my seat. Same with this class, same with the class we had just finished. Then, sooner or later, Akiyoshi would forget about me. There were tons of other people at this school. How many people are approaching the MC? Well, so far just this person, hopefully. Just drink the water. Oh, my back. I'll crack my fingers right now, so it might be a bit loud. Oh, I'm so sorry. That was really loud, huh? Alright. There was no reason that it had to be me. Not that loud? That's good. And so, I could not even begin to understand why it was that. Just then, she came running up to me. Oh God, why? Why what? Nothing. I was just thinking about something. Without me ever determining the reason why, somehow, before I knew it. 2 months had passed since our first meeting. Already, I resigned myself to spending every Monday 4th period and the late lunch after with her. Due to my own shortcomings, I was unable to push away someone so clingy, and so I had kept the pretense of her acquaintance. I started to pick up the fried white fish that I always seemed to be eating before placing it back down on my plate. You know, I said, you really need to stop attention grabbing so much. You really need to stop attention grabbing so much attention during lectures. I don't know how many times I have to tell you, Tabata-kun, but I'm not attention grabbing. I just want to be certain about the facts. Yeah, but all it does is make you stand out. I come to realize that, surprisingly, there was no real harm in just keeping on as her conversation partner. Well, I mean, I think it helps the lesson if the professor realizes that there were students with opinions that differ from what they're teaching in the classroom, in the lecture. During our lecture just before, I was thinking, idealism isn't the same as an ideal. An ideal is something that you should strive for, but idealism sneers in the face of that. Peace clearly isn't built on the back of war. It's built on the back of more peace. At least, that's what I think. There's no real harm in it. But there was no mistaking that being deemed her friend was an incredibly vexing thing. Partly as a means of soundly arguing against her, I once more picked up my fried fish. if I were to voice an opinion now or do anything that might imply I was invested in this conversation. She would just argue herself blue in the face until we were both in accord. It wasn't out of desire to beat her opponent down so much as sincerely wishing to understand the thoughts of people. It wasn't out of desire to beat her opponent down so much as sincerely wishing to understand the thoughts of people with different opinions from her own and amend her own opinions if necessary. I really hated that part of her. It was this vexing part of her that kept her so clearly ostracized from the people around her. Plenty of times when Akiyoshi was not around, I had overheard disparaging whispers from her. The idea was something that you should chase until you can seize it. Let me get the MC. I'm not gonna lie, if I had this experience, I can understand where the main character is coming from. As always, I kept quiet under the unerring gaze from those big round eyes of hers, poking at my snout as a diversion. Thinking about it now, those eyes were perhaps the very reason that I had not managed to shake Akiyoshi at all during those 2 months. At some point or other, within the many times each week that I would make her acquaintance, I had come to discover a certain purity to her. I know we're talking about Fade. Beyond all that vexing naivety, it was a purity that was certain that the things she believed in could be brought to fruition with effort, and that with the power of that belief, they would come true. However, I believe the reason this so pained me to see was that I could recall, in some small way, having thought similar things myself in the past, which meant that my opinions of her was based somewhat on my embarrassment at my own past self. Looking at her from afar, one would take her for a simple idiot. However, when faced differently with that purity, it was difficult for me, at the very least, to completely write her off. Had I cut all ties with her at that moment, she would not have had any particularly sour feelings toward me, but still would give me a bit more freedom than the times when others thought it was best to cut off ties with me and treat me as a stranger, rather than hate that about me. Akiyoshi accepted me. As a result, within those 2 months, the whispers surrounding her had begun to spread to me as well. This was not the university life I had hoped for. That reminds me, what was the study of international relations clubs like? I dropped in on one of their meetings, but I didn't really vibe with it, Akiyoshi said, laughing it off. But the truth was all over her face. More than likely, there had been those present who had already come to the conclusion that they did not care for Akiyoshi, at least once. I had seen an upperclassman directly express their disdain for how often she interrupted class. I got the impression that something had happened with the aforementioned Model UN as well. Ooh, my back. Let me see when's a good stopping point. There we go, that's a good stopping. So this was probably when I'll take my break. And then a bajillion more pages, I think. Yeah, here I'll probably stop on page 47 today. Fade, cease. Fade, no, please. Don't out me like that. Gonna go check out any other ones later? Well, by the time we're juniors, we're going to end up pretty busy with classwork, and I get the feeling that the first 2 years are going to be pretty focused on self-directed studies. She trailed off, but there was obvious disappointment on her face. If you really want to join the activity, maybe you should start something up yourself, I consoled, halfway joking. Akiyoshi suddenly shouted through a mouthful of hamburger steak. What? That's a great idea. She swallowed the bite that was already in her mouth, and stared at me with her usual intense eyes. I knew in that moment that I made a mistake. But no chapters? Yeah. A club. That's it. I could start one. Why did I never think of that? She took out a memo pad and started scribbling something on the paper. Waiting around to find somewhere that will accept me is a waste of time. I don't know how I never realized that. Thanks for the advice. Her cheeks pinked in elation. No, that's not what I was getting at. How many people do you think we need to apply for a charter? 5 maybe? I need to officially confirm that. There's already 2 of us here, so I think we just need 3 more. Wait, are you including me in that number? Well, I mean, it was your idea, Kaede. And we're friends, aren't we? We had already reached a point where Akiyoshi sometimes called me by my first name. I assumed it was to lessen the awkwardness of asking favors or thanking me. I hardened my face just enough to not overtly dampen her enthusiasm. That seems like a lot of work. I mean, we'll start off with activities that won't be boring with just the 2 of us. You don't have to do anything that makes you unhappy. We can leave the range of activities pretty wide open, though. Oh, we have to make sure we stick to our principles, so we don't just seem like some weird adults. You stop that wonder. Her vision was expanding outward infinitely with no destination in sight, and had a front row seat. A mission statement such as becoming our ideal selves within 4 years. Ah. She really is chock full of embarrassing quips, I thought. I felt such strong secondhand embarrassment that I nearly let out an awkward laugh myself, but did not. I still had my principles. That said, I got the feeling that I was about to be swept up into some strange organization just because I sympathized with my hypothetical friend's sorrows. So I asked a question that was somewhat belittling, with a nuance that suggested it wasn't. You know, I always have to wonder how is it that you can live your life thinking about such overambitious ideas. What I hoped to imply was that I was not capable of the same, so I would not be participating. It's not overambitious, it's what's inside my heart. But I mean, try to become the person that you want to be is something that everyone thinks about, right? Not really. Obviously, you had to think about what you were going to do after college. I, at the very least, did not spend my days pondering my ideal self the way Akiyoshi seemed to. I mean, I'm not really that much of a positive thinker. Is that being positive? Honestly, if I had to put a label on it, I'd say that seeing your current self in a less favorable light is more like negative thinking. If I was to become the sort of adult that I never wanted to be, some sort of authoritarian people pleaser who always cared about what other people thought, I'd rather be dead. Her wrote. Honestly, I wish I enacted this principle. When I first met Fade, I regret everything. As her so-called friend, it occurred to me that things would be a lot easier for Akiyoshi if she were to become that sort of person. Also, I guess that becoming your ideal self might be overambitious of you. If you imagine yourself as an ally of justice or something silly like that. But much smaller dreams are just as valid. Like living by a personal code. A personal code? Yeah, the sort of thing that I can never discard. It's that important. You must have at least one principle like that. I closed my mouth and averted my eyes to evade her steadfast gaze. Leave me alone, babe. A personal code. The philosophies by which I lived my life were something deeply ingrained within me. However, I was unsure if that was something safe to voice. The only thing that gave me push was the simple fact that I realized that all I'd lose here by facing her criticism was the time spent listening to her lectures, so I decided to try telling her about my personal code. Any principles on your phone? What the? I'm not sure it counts as my personal code, but I always try to be careful not to get too close to others, or to directly contradict anyone's opinion. I guess. As long as I do that, it reduces the chances of me hurting others. As a side effect, protects me as well. I remember Akiyoshi's face. I heard someone waking up in the... Okay, someone did wake up in the house. It'll be fine. I remember Akiyoshi's face, clearly after she heard this short and dry little spiel of mine. Her eyes were wide open, her mouth tightly shut. I was certain that this philosophy was one that Akiyoshi, who always loudly voiced her opinions in the pursuit of becoming the person she wanted to be, could never agree with. It was only natural that she would be lost for words. I was sure. However, instead, she said, "Wow, that's really nice of you." Her eyes were still wide open. "That means that you don't want to hurt anyone, right? I had no idea you thought about stuff like that. Like, what the heck? You're a really nice guy, Kaede." I don't really think that's nice per se. No, it's super nice. Wow, honestly, that's an amazing way of thinking. She nodded profusely, huffing through her nose. Not once had anyone ever affirmed me in that way. Again, she looked at me with those eyes of hers. Whenever she did that, I could not dismiss her opinion. It's embarrassing to admit, but I suddenly realized that somewhere in some corner of my heart, some small amount of kindness might actually exist in there. "Come on, you have to do this with me." Her gaze burned brightest. Brighter. Okay, during the break, I'm gonna put the lamp closer. "I really hate standing out though." "Well then, in secret, it'll get you to agree to it. It can be a secret society." "A secret society?" I uttered reflexively, hearing this childish proposal come flying out of her mouth. As though this in fact embarrassed Akiyoshi as well, she averted her eyes, waving her hands in front of her face with a, well, something like that. I couldn't help but smile at seeing her so uncharacteristically flustered. "Well, I'll think about it." "Okay. So what's the name of this secret society?" I said, half teasing. Akiyoshi jutted out her lip and then pointed at my t-shirt, saying, something for which there's no confirmed theory about in purpose or function. A moai. On the front of my t-shirt, which I had just happened to pick up somewhere or other, was a caricature of a moai statue in profile. Not wanting to orient myself strongly in any particular direction, this vagueness put me at ease. I suppose that was the day it all began. I started getting together with Akiyoshi more than I ever had before, and it was perhaps then that the pretense of our shared friendship truly vanished. It was not the university life that I had hoped for from the outset, but from there on out, an exhilarating time began. No matter how quiet or passive I remained, Akiyoshi always had something new and exciting to bring. Moai. And then one day, Kaede. Say cheese. As I sat beside Akiyoshi in the usual lecture hall, she suddenly called my name and grabbed me by the shoulder. Taking a selfie of us both with a digital camera before I could comprehend what was happening. I didn't hear my stomach rumble, right? That would be really awkward. Huh? What's with the photo? I just bought this camera. Pretty cool, huh? I'll send you the pic later. Test shot? Yeah, I can take pics anytime I like now, so it's best to get some practice in. When I finally got the file for the picture from my sharp-tongued friend, I saw myself looking at Akiyoshi in confusion. And Akiyoshi with a wide smile upon her face. From then on, taking photos become part and parcel of our moai activities. But think about it now, that was the only time that the two of us ever took a picture together. Then another time. It's ready. What is this? I took the item that was offered to me, finding myself holding a plastic keychain. It depicted a cartoon moai head. Awesome, right? We can hang it on our bags as a mark of our membership. But aren't secret societies supposed to not stand out? Geez, you still on about that? It's fine, Kaede. I'll be the one to wear it. You keep yours somewhere safe. By that point, Akiyoshi was always calling me by my given name. I eventually ended up putting my keys on the keychain, Though I never told her that. Then another time, and another time, and another time. I came to realize that Akiyoshi was spending the majority of her time at university with me, and so just once I had to ask, shouldn't you be hanging out with the other girls sometimes? I prefer hanging out with guys. You don't have to worry about stuff so much. It had occurred to me that Akiyoshi probably had very few people she could call friends, and I understood that life in feminine society must be difficult for a person like her. There were plenty of times when she did not smile. Her face hardened when she read the news, and when she grew angry at someone's opinion, she cut them with a sneer. By the time I realized that though, I was already well beyond thinking that she was someone to be avoided. I recognized this, and I understood her. The embarrassing behavior, the naivety that she possessed, always chasing after her ideals, after the truth, were things that I did not share. By the way, Kaede, thank you for accepting me, she said suddenly one day. Sometime after our first meeting, I believe when we were on the way back from some museum we had visited. What do you mean? Well, I mean, you once told me that you try to avoid getting close to people, so that you can avoid hurting them just by living. So, I'm glad that you accepted me as your friend when you could have just turned me away the first time. I even spoke to you. Without you, I'd be really lonely at school. By then, I was already beyond thinking what an embarrassing thing that was of her to say. Akiyoshi was the sort of friend who could think about things and say them aloud. Wow, awkward. What's with this all of a sudden? That's so rude. I'm holding my heart up here. I'm still remembering the way we laughed that day, even though Akiyoshi's laughter is no longer part of this world. Alright, I'm gonna take a small break. Alright. Let's resume. From the moment I opened my eyes in the morning, all I could think about was the bothersome task I would have to attend to all day. Oh my gosh, I can read so much better with this light now. As a testament to my displeasure upon merely raising myself up from my futon, I heaved a sigh as though it had already taken up all my energy for a day to do so. Regardless, I changed dutifully into my interview suit, picked up my bag and stepped out of the house, wondering all the while exactly what it was that I was moving my body for. I suppose social sensibilities or some vague sense of unease. I grabbed some bread on the way to the station to fill my stomach and stepped onto the train along with all of the salarymen who were running late. The suited figures on the car seemed to be collectively carrying baggage far heavier than the large parcel in my arms. The train arrived at a station in the business district, one which I had disembarked at many times before in the past few months. At this point, there was no excusing ever letting my facial muscles start to atrophy. Atrophy? So I put on as lively an expression as I could, one that would be objectively societally acceptable. As I exited the turnstile, I took out my phone, confirmed the location of the business I was visiting today, as well as the name of said business and what their industry was. I crammed information about so many different companies in my head every day that I often forgot which one was which. Basically, I only ever got a strong enough impression from each of these places for them to be totally forgettable. But as long as I prepared suitable enough questions and answers, they would never know that, or at the very least, even if I did fumble, I could show them that I had the chops to cover that up. I navigated my walking route via map, arriving properly at the office building in question 10 minutes before the appointed time. I wondered what the adults who worked here felt when they showed up for duty at this towering building every day. Perhaps it at least helped them feel as though they were maintaining some measure of self-respect. I straightened my spine, put on a casual smile, and plunged into the enemy stronghold. I passed through the automatic sliding doors and headed for the spacious elevator lobby, finding two people already waiting there. There was a grinning man who looked to be in his later 20s and a woman similarly clad in interview attire. One could tell at a glance that they were a recruiter and a job hunter. I had a fundamental dislike of job hunters, so I kept my distance. Still, I was able to overhear much of their conversation while waiting for the elevator to arrive. The recruiter seemed overly familiar with the woman speaking in an oddly flirtatious fashion, just as I was quietly wondering whether she might not be aiming to sleep her way into a job. The elevator arrived, and I stepped in. I assumed the pair might board the elevator together, but as I waited inside, the woman bowed her head, said a thanks and some parting words to the recruiter, and then the man stepped through the open doors alone. It seemed their interview or whatever hadn't concluded. The pair continued chatting until just before the doors closed, and I wondered whether I should go ahead and push the door close button. When at the very tail end of the conversation, I heard some unforgettable words from the recruiter. "Alright, see you at the Moai meet." Though there was no way I was going to let the businessman beside me see my reaction, internally, my mood immediately soured. So that girl went to my school, then. The recruiter disembarked at the 3rd floor, leaving me alone for the rest of the ride up the 9th floor. I took the opportunity to heave a sigh and then studied my breath, once more straightening up my spine and fixing my expression. There was a reception desk immediately outside of the 9th floor elevators. I approached with a smile and gave my name. "Hello, my name is Tabata Kaede. I have an appointment." "For an interview," I said with an award-winning smile. The receptionist showed me the waiting room, where there were 2 other students with the same smiles on their faces. Smiles that looked as though our faces had been permanently frozen in place. It was enough to assure me of how desperately unnerving the creatures known as job hunters were. "When is this?" Okay, I don't think they mentioned it, actually. I don't think they mentioned it. I mean, I know because I've read this part before, but... Well, you'll find out, Wander. Now, I keep hitting the mic because it's right in front of me, so this mic position's kind of weird. Sorry about that. Though I had not physically exhausted myself whatsoever, by the time I returned home, I was exhausted nonetheless. After my arrival that morning, I had attended 1 interview and 1 information seminar. I collapsed the moment I made it to my living room, loosening the necktie that I was expected to wear on a daily basis but could never truly get used to. I would probably wrinkle my interview suit that way, but I couldn't bring myself to care. I was supposed to have used my last 3 years as a grace period to recharge my batteries, but instead I was about to hit rock bottom, going through the motions of job hunting in earnest that had thoroughly exhausted me. Then, it was probably good that I received a call when I did. I waited dutifully until the 3rd ring, and then picked up. "Tabata Kaede of XX University speaking. Yes. Oh no. Thank you so much for taking this time out of your busy schedule to speak with me. Yes, of course. Oh, thank you very much. Yes, understand. Yes, yes, thank you so much. Yes, well, then. I'll talk to you later. Yes, thank you very much. Goodbye for now." I hung up the phone, suddenly noticing that I had at some point started kneeling Seiza style. All the tension then flooded from my body, and I fell back onto the floor. There was no point in me even worrying about wrinkles anymore. The call had been from the last company I had spoken with today. The call's contents? "We would be absolutely thrilled to hire you, Tabata-san." In other words, I was in the home stretch. Oh, right. I looked up at the ceiling just above me, speaking tentative words of triumph. But there was no joy behind those sounds. The problem was not that this company was not my first choice. It was a large corporation. There was no unsavory rumors about it, so I should have been thrilled. I was also relieved not to have to go through the interview process again. However, I was immediately stricken with a feeling of anxiety. In an instant, I had become a full-fledged member of society. I had only spoken any words of joy because I knew that while this decision was only still tentative, this was a joyful thing as far as my position in society. It was just that my emotions did not actually agree. I got it in mind that I might go to sleep right then and there, enjoying the warm May weather. But I realized that there were still some things I needed to do and stood up. I changed into some sweatpants and took out a happoshu from the refrigerator in the kitchen on the other side of the doorway. Heading for my computer desk, I tapped away on the keyboard, which was short. One shift key. I logged into my Hotmail account. I had to email the HR departments of all the companies I was interviewing at, including the one I had just interviewed at today. I let them know that I had accepted an offer and would no longer be continuing the interview process. I pried up the pull tab on the can, taking a sip on the happoshu. Try to imagine how it might feel to be a personnel manager. Turned down by a hopeful student, it probably just meant that it narrowed down the pool of people they had to reject. Thinking about it that way made this a little easier. Just as I had finished draining the can, my vision began to swim. I would feel the alcohol buzzing in my skull. I did not have to wonder if it was because I was tired. I leaned back into the chair and again looked up to the ceiling. The ceiling was still clean and white. I had once tried smoking a cigarette, but I found it didn't suit me. The thought suddenly occurring to me, I picked up my phone and sent Tosuke a text letting him know about my offer. Immediately I got a reply, "Congrats," and was relieved to know that there was at least someone I could be myself around. I tossed my phone onto the desk and dazedly returned to the grind. Thinking about it, job hunting was all about pretending over and over again not to be yourself. That's why I was so tired. However, I doubted that was merely an issue restricted only to job hunting. It was sure to continue into my professional life, and I would need to be even more cautious. I had tried to get some practice with this working part-time job, but it was nowhere on the same level. No one gets to live by their own principles once you become a working adult. Everyone has to suppress their true selves. Thus, that simple "congrats" from Tosuke was a sign to me that I had cleared the first hurdle, and that even more formidable obstacles awaited me ahead. I wondered if I could even be thankful for it. I emptied the can and retrieved another from the fridge. On the short trip back to the office, the overly chilled beer in hand, I staggered, slipping on a badly written CV that had fallen onto the floor. I picked up the CV that had attempted to wound me. It was distressingly smooth to the touch. I thought for a moment of throwing it away, but instead returned to my desk and sat down. The book still in hand, I read over the tidy self-introduction and personal statement that had been written in ballpoint pen. Find meaning in your life by being helpful to every single person you meet, not just some theoretical individual. Be ambitious in your hopes and dreams, but don't just stare into the far distance. Cherish every step of the journey. There is joy in seeking common ground in every conversation. It was lies. All lies. But that was to be expected. I was by no means such an upstanding person. It was idiotic, but I also did not care to give up the lie. It was my ability to survive that had gotten me the job offer after all. I'd obtained the means to live. I was not wrong in this. It was fine if you had the ability and the looks and the means to live however you wanted, but that was not me. And that was fine. Living life as someone other than myself, other than yourself. I wasn't wrong. I couldn't be wrong. I was simply not wrong. Was I? Perhaps it was both the power of the alcohol and my own sense of relief from the job offer that lowered my defenses. Those sort of thoughts that I would never usually care to think about began drifting through my head. By not being myself, I had gotten results. However, that did not feel like my own success. From here on out, I was going to have to live half my life with something that I had obtained by disguising my own self. A stifling life. One that deep down I could not fully consent to. So then, what had the 21 years I lived up until now all been for? Was there even any point to the past 3 years I had lived? My head swirled with the knowledge that there wasn't a problem, that wasn't the problem. That was not what was wrong here. It was all because of the alcohol and because of the job offer. What if I could live without worrying about my abilities and my looks and my surroundings without having to make those calculations every day? Hey Wander, hey Asia. Wait, hey Wander. You still don't Wander. If only I could just be an idealist. What if there had been something I had wished more strongly to obtain by my own hands? I shook my head. No such thing existed. So that I could rid myself of these pointless thoughts, I drained the second can in one go. However, once I had begun sinking into the bog of these booze-muddled ponderings, all I could do was sink in deeper. By the time I rested the weight of my fevered head onto the desk, stacking a fourth can along the edge of it, I lost not only all my defenses, but my reasoning. And then, I realized it. It was not a distant memory. It was there. Stark. I lifted my hot and heavy head and rested my fingers on the mouse. I moved the arrow-shaped cursor down to the lower left, hovering it over a folder. I double-clicked, finding only a single image file inside. My fingers were trembling solely because of the alcohol. I steeled myself and once more double-clicked with unnecessary speed. Oh, that's terrifying, I wonder. What genre are we reading? School life drama? Maybe? You can type !book for the a brief summary synopsis. Drama, not trauma. The image that opened was a photo taken 3 years prior. I regarded the photo through eyes swimming in a swaying skull. The price of my haircut aside, I had not changed one bit. In the line of my surprised gaze in the photo was a smile that was no longer in this world. A sigh slipped from my lips all on its own. Hey, Akiyoshi. My own voice was much higher than I thought it would be. I've got a question. Very funny, Ichiro. I could feel my own thoughts curling in my mouth. What did you want to be? I asked. Though I knew I would never receive an answer to that question, still, I wanted to know more than anything what it was that Akiyoshi was thinking back then. I wish someone could at least impart that much knowledge to me. Someone who could accomplish nothing as himself. It was all a lie in the end. The words that we exchanged, mine and Akiyoshi's. I remembered how we were back as freshmen. I tried not to remember, but the seams of the barrel burst and the memories came flooding out. When I first met Akiyoshi, I thought she was nothing more than a troublesome person. I accepted the way she was, and we became friends. Akiyoshi was always spouting her ideals, and under her influence at some point, I began to have dreams of my own. I even thought that within those 4 years I might find it. That ideal self of mine that Akiyoshi spoke of. But it was too late for that. There was no going back now. Now, I was alone. Maybe things would have been different if you were here. I called out to her, but of course there was no reply. She could no longer speak to me. And so my life as a university student had come to an end. Exhausted from job hunting, grumbling into my beer cans, unable to do a single thing. I could not become the person I wished to be. I had no idea who that person even was in the first place. 4 years were going to pass me by without me so much as receiving a sign that those ideals of Akiyoshi's were ever going to become reality, even if there were still 10 months left. The world could change tomorrow. Akiyoshi had said that once. I heard those words in my head as clearly as if they had been spoken yesterday. My own mind was slipping, taunting me. If there was a reason for everyone to put down their guns as one, then all wars would end tomorrow. Who did say that, huh? Stupid. These stupid ideals. But there's nothing wrong, nothing that will ever be too late to change. Stop it. It hurts. It hurts so badly. The pit of my chest ached. Are you saying that there's still time? These last 3 years of mine, could I still make them mean something? If I could still make it in time, like Akiyoshi said? Maybe if I did want to change something, maybe there was something I wanted to change about myself. I no longer knew who was that I wanted to become. Without Akiyoshi, I had no idea. You can't change the things that you don't understand. So then, what could I change? In the photo, Akiyoshi was smiling. A smile all her own. Utterly unlike the one that I or the other job hunters who had been present in the office had worn. I'll read and respond to chat after we finish. It's only 4 more pages. Suddenly, the scene I had witnessed just before boarding the elevator that morning flashed before my eyes. I saw again that girl from my university, who was accomplishing all that I had in 3 years just by flattering a salaryman. That girl was part of Moai, I told Akiyoshi, but she did not reply. She was gone. After all, never in all this time had that fact been as clear to me as it was right now. If the Akiyoshi in that photo had heard what I was presently saying, she would have been shocked. She might have been disappointed, or even angry. However, all we have is reality. Reality is what's here with us right now, and the end result of all that Akiyoshi had left behind was the job Hunter had seen today. Thus, in the end, Akiyoshi had ended up a liar. Even now, it still aches me somewhat to think that she would ever be deemed that way. Something I wanted to change. Like making that lie Akiyoshi told into reality. If only. As I spoke my slurred words with my clumsy tongue, though I had no real goal or concrete plan or means, I felt a flame burning in my aching chest. It was not a raging fire, just a quieter, smoldering little ember. It was around then that I blacked out. The next morning when I came to, I found myself curled up on the floor beside the office chair that I should have been sitting in. The flooring beneath me was sticky. Before I even moved, just as I was registering what sort of position I was in, I realized that the flame inside me, inside my chest, was still burning. When we first formed Moai, we went out on all sorts of places under the pretense of the activities of our secret society. More succinctly, we went to photo galleries of investigative journalism from around the world and lectures given by authors who spoke out against the hate speech and the like. Naturally, it was always Akiyoshi who strong-armed me into these adventures. That day, the two of us had gone to see a war documentary. It was as we had stopped in at a cafe along the way home afterwards, sharing our impressions on the film, and it was beginning to seem that one or the other of us was looking to part ways that I suddenly heard Akiyoshi. So, we went to see a movie today. But what really is your ultimate goal here? I needed to know. If I was to be involved from here on out, I needed to know what destination was in store for the future of Moai. Last time, we went to a photo gallery. This time, a movie. I had no objection with going on these excursions, but to be honest with myself, I wasn't keen on the idea of doing volunteer work or anything. However, as she was very much wont to, Akiyoshi completely misinterpreted my question. Well, my ultimate goal is to achieve global peace. No, I mean like, not your overarching goals. I'm wondering what it is we're supposed to be doing in Moai over these 4 years, I corrected. She looked at me a bit dumbfounded, and then with a timid smile that could almost be construed as self-conscious. Ah, I gotcha. But I mean, I think it's the same for Moai. The same for Moai? You mean world peace? I said with an unintentional smirk. Akiyoshi did not share my wry smile. If it could, yeah. I like to ease the suffering of the people of the world, only if it's just a little. That's why I think it's really important to watch these films and such to increase awareness. Because we learn about these things today, perhaps you or I could do something about this stuff one day. Kaede, she said, completely earnestly. Akiyoshi had misunderstood me, but at the same time, I had misunderstood her. I don't think I understood what it truly meant to have an ideal. There were no limits or bounds to Akiyoshi's ideals. It didn't matter if we were just students, if we were only 2 people. She would never even voice such an excuse. I'm sure that, at that time, Akiyoshi truly believed that she would bring peace to the world with her own 2 hands. I had no idea just how wide the world was in Akiyoshi's eyes. Well, one day, maybe. One day means it could happen any day. That's what I think. You could die in any way, and you never know when it's going to happen. You got to leave at least a little something behind. In that moment, I felt that, unlike myself, there's no way that Akiyoshi was not going to leave something behind in this world when she died. She was going to live an accomplished, fulfilled life. Or so I hoped anyway. That's why, should anything ever happen to me, I want you to carry on my and Moai's mission, Kaede. Don't say ominous stuff like that. You never know. Nothing in this world is certain, but doesn't that just mean that we have to live every day to its fullest? She looked me straight in the eye, and I averted my gaze, unable to voice any further opinion on this matter. And yet, even now, in my 4th year, I had yet to live up to the important role that Akayoshi had thrust upon me. Alright, I think that'll be it.